Our dear Heavenly Father, we sincerely thank you for this opportunity that we're able to gather together and share ideas. And God, we pray for your wisdom and your guidance. Lord, we pray for our first responders, all of our people here at Georgetown Township, but particularly those that are risking their lives on a daily basis. And we reflect on the two police officers that have passed away that were in their patrol cars. And we pray that you be with their families, and we pray for healing in that area too, Lord. Dear Lord, please be with all the people that are traveling right now, being with their families and just having a good time, but we pray that they'll be able to get back home safely. Thank you for your guidance. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, John. You'll join me with a pledge, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the record show that the total board is in attendance. I'll have a motion in approval of the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Support.
Any questions on the agenda? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It is carried. You have your communications, letters, and reports. Any questions on those from the board? Seeing none, we'll go to the public comments portion. You all look like you're all old timers. You're familiar with the process, so I won't say it again. Come to the podium, please, if you wish. In fact, you don't even have to say your name. We know that by now. Don't know your addresses, though. No one? Okay. Move on to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there anything on the consent agenda any board member would like to take off? Seeing none, all in favor of the consent agenda, say by aye.
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 Opposed, nay. It is carried. Next is the second reading of the adoption of ordinance 2015-01, which is a Michigan Motor Vehicle Code and Uniform Traffic Code, which we do every year just to incorporate any changes that may be made. I'll entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Questions concerning that code?
Does that require a voice vote or no?
Yes. You can give me a chance to say, would you call the roll, please? Would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Wieringa.
Yes.
Mr. Valerius.
Yes.
Mrs. Skolma.
Yes.
Dr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle.
Yes.
And Mr. Schwam.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. It's passed.
And the next item on the agenda is the realtor for 200 Baldwin and 200 Chicago Drive. Last meeting, we had the three firms make a presentation to us, and the Finance Committee is making a recommendation that we employ, negotiate a listing agreement with Colliers, and that agreement is being brought back to the board in January. I'll move that.
Support.
Questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I was the one that asked the Finance Committee to bring this to the board. Since that time, we have received information from Colliers. I think all the board members perhaps received that email. One of the issues or one of the concerns that we had when we said bring it back January 12 was that we did not have information about the listing prices for those two pieces of property. And now that and as I alluded to that email, all of you have received that, we do have the listing price for 200 Baldwin and 200 Chicago Drive. And so my feeling is, rather than waiting until January 12, if I need to amend this motion, I would amend it to complete the listing agreement with the listing costs or the listing prices, whatever terminology we use there, and that we approve it. That way we can hit the ground running in January. They can get their signs out there and we can move ahead. But if that's something that takes that amending this motion, or would that be, do you feel that would be a totally new motion, or can we amend the current motion to reflect that we move ahead with Collier and those listing prices as presented?
I think, see if this follows what you're talking about. If we amended it to say, to direct the township superintendent to complete a listing agreement with Colliers. Change negotiate to complete, and strike, and to bring it back to the board. Would that fulfill
That,
what you were after?
yes, if the understanding there is when we say complete based on these figures, yes.
Okay. So is there support for that amendment to make those changes? Support. Is there any questions concerning the amendment?
Guess maybe for clarity, is the final agreement coming back to the board then, or is the superintendent taking it from here with Colliers and,
He's taking it from here.
okay.
You got that information, I presume, that he's referring to?
I received the information today,
Yeah.
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
And that means that a sign could be put up immediately?
No, he has to wait till he contacts Colliers.
I mean, upon discussion with them. Okay,
Yes. Very soon.
all right.
Yeah, and I think the rationale is Mr. Radeclock said, is to implement or remove 3 weeks delay. Any more questions on the amendment?
I guess just for clarity on the amounts, I don't think we've discussed or we've mentioned amounts yet. Should they be included in the motion? Okay.
It wouldn't hurt to have them in the amount, in the,
You could insert it.
yeah, it could be attached to the motion. That
Yeah,
also.
And I guess maybe my only concern right now, I did get the information today, I didn't have a lot of time to review it today, so the listing agreement itself, have you had a chance to read through it, or has council had a chance to look it over? Okay, before you execute it, are you gonna go over it with council then? With obviously our main concerns being what happens in the event that Colliers doesn't perform as they've said they would. We have every expectation they will, but if that doesn't occur, that the agreement is written in such a way that allows us to use one of the other agents at that point. But as far as the amounts then, if we want to include those or not, I know what we're talking about here is for 200 Baldwin, 1.9 million, which is roughly equivalent to the purchase price that the township had when there was those dilapidated buildings sitting on the property. 200 Chicago Drive, we're talking about listing 294 Chicago Drive, which is commonly known as Payless, at $500,000, and 174 Chicago Drive at $2,788,000, which is the former Kmart portion of the parcel. And that separately tonight, we're going to be discussing the KFC. So we may sell KFC separate from that. Or that a total listing price of $3,088,000 if they were to buy the whole package of parcels. Am I reading that correctly?
1.9.
Okay.
Is that acceptable to add to your?
Yes, that'd be fine. I think it's good to, that we have those figures included.
Is acceptable to the seconder also? Okay, anything else on the amendment? If not, all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's carried. Now the motion, any further questions or comments on the motion?
I just have a question on the email about the clock. I'm not sure, was it 200 Baldwin Street? Someone sent a photo of a clock. Did anyone else get it?
I'm trying to remember.
What is it that you're asking regarding that clock? Is it just an idea, or?
It wasn't me. I don't know who. Oh.
I don't know where that
Well,
came.
this doesn't really have anything to do with a realtor. If you want to discuss that under discussion, I got it.
The clock was related to, was actually supplied by Mike, and we talked in the service committee about the possibility of that point, and should we be looking at, because that might be difficult to market, something that could symbolize Georgetown, Jenison, and a clock might be a possibility. So the thought, should we sell the point? Should we keep some of that land? And it was just a thought for discussion.
That's an important discussion, because obviously if you're listing the property that includes the point, it no longer becomes an option if the property gets sold.
I think we could certainly have the discussion before we would agree to sell the property, though. I think, I don't think that discussion necessarily needs to inhibit the listing of the property. If we decide later that a clock's more important than selling it, we just have to choose not to sell it if that offer comes in.
I would disagree with that. If someone brought you a ready, willing, and able buyer at a full price, and you have a legal description that includes the point, you would have to sell that piece.
Oh, correct, if that's what the offer was on. What I'm saying is, tonight, if you're saying you want to hold up listing the property for a discussion of a potential clock, myself, I'm probably more in favor of selling the property than I am putting a clock on the property.
I think Ron's point is the listing agreement identifies the parcel number and numbers and does not make an exclusion or a potential exclusion for any piece of land. And if we're authorizing potentially to list it here for a year, with an automatic renewal, I think, unless otherwise canceled with a 30-day notice toward the end of the year, we're potentially locked in. I'm sure they could mutually agree to amend that agreement with us before they really put any time and effort into it, but I think they just describe it by by the bare numbers of the properties. So we'd have to say something if we were intending to exclude any portion of the land. The same is true for the Kmart site. We haven't, if you look at their listing, we haven't excluded the land along the river, which they're probably happy to. I mean, they can't sell that low land anyways, and they know we're going to make it look good. Probably enhances and shouldn't detract from the purchase price and shouldn't limit the purchase price even if the amount of acreage goes down. But still, as it's now presented to us, we haven't reserved anything from that parcel. Okay. Right, but that's not in the listing. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to go in there. Sure, sure.
Dan, what are our options with the point? Is this something we should be considering now?
Want to retain as unsuggested part of the property. Obviously, the buyer needs to know what's available. Whether you decide before the listing, if you get full price, you're kind of committing to selling it the way it is now. So it would be nice to have some direction.
Yeah, this proposal for the listing covers the entire property. And so, so the board wanted to carve a piece of that out. They would have to define what piece they want carved out.
Right. Now, to Dan's point, if they don't come with a full offer, then you'd obviously have to
Was the church that used to be there a non-conforming use? I have to believe it is. It was so close to that.
Oh, yes.
So that
It's right on
whoever
the
would
sidewalk.
purchase now would have to be conforming. They're not going to be able to build to the end of the point like that church had.
No, you're correct.
So we know it'll be undeveloped land. So is the only detraction in the mind of somebody who'd be a potential buyer is, well, what do you plan to do with it? I know I can't do anything if I buy it, but what do you plan to do that could detract from what I want to do on this property? I kind of favor what, I don't know if it was Ron or John who first brought it up, but I can imagine sort of the tip of that point potentially even being a modest identification of, Jennison Business District, or a head nod toward the name Jennison in some ways, who knows what, but something there that wouldn't inhibit or detract from the buyer's use of the main parcel, but would still give us options for some kind of marker, of some kind.
Well, I think also that has not been totally settled in regards to the Veterans Memorial. But you said you would, with the listing agent, say a piece of that corner may be reserved.
I said that we would do that on the creek, on the Chicago Drive parcel, that would be reserved for the trail.
Yeah.
I didn't really get an indication if it was something to involve. Is that, I'm not sure if that's what the word, maybe different direction.
These guys are experts. I mean, they may say, oh, you don't want to do that. I'm telling you, or no, I think we can make that work. That shouldn't hurt our marketing efforts.
Yeah, I think if you look at that sharp triangle, if it were a larger company that bought that piece on 200 Baldwin, about what they could put there is their big sign, or not limited by law or ordinance, but they could put a sign there, which would be a very attractive place for a business to put a sign right on that point. But it so comes to so narrow of a piece that, what's the setbacks for? Yeah, that's true.
But even in the future, as far as traffic, as you try to make a right turn there, if you have a large truck, you're jumping the curb every time. I would like to see us have options on that property. It's under our control now.
What options would you like?
I would say a certain number of feet. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to look at it in detail. I'd kind of defer to Ron or someone else has stronger knowledge in this area. But I think, as we're saying, it's virtually unusable for many businesses, but it could be very valuable to us. And
I'm with you, John. Even if we end up wanting to round out that turn, or who knows what, you might want to move that curb back, or you might want to use it, as I say, for a marker or whatever. I think unless we got to, you can always have a buyer come and say, look, I'm interested if you'll forego this exception and let us have the whole piece. And we may go, boy, we want these guys. Let's let them have the whole piece. I don't think in and of itself it would scare a good buyer away. It may lead to a dialogue where they want us to give up something, but it'd be better to have something to give up than to give it up from the get-go. I agree with
Mr.
you.
Chairman, I would say that we as a township will have 90 feet from the center of the road, that right-of-way. That will be something that we have control over, at least the Ottawa County Road Commission will have control over. And personally, I would like us to move forward in terms of completing this listing agreement. I, for one, would like to see who is out there who would like to purchase these properties. Maybe they'll sit there for a year or two. I have no idea, but I'd certainly like to know. And I feel that we've talked about selling it. If we had an idea to do something with that property, then let's get those ideas out. But I haven't heard anything other than sure would be nice to hold on to some of it. But do we really envision that we're going to do something with it? I have my doubts personally, but that's just me. So I'm in favor of moving ahead and getting this listed and see what may transpire. In 6 months from now, 8 months from now, or a year from now, we may be sitting here and saying, that hasn't sold, and then we may have some ideas for what we want to do with the point. But that, even those ideas of doing something with it are pretty nebulous at this point, and I think we should allow Colliers to see what they can do for us and recoup some of our money from these pieces of property.
I think some of the suggestions are more than nebulous. I think that having the flexibility of perhaps taming that corner and the right now the angle of that corner is a specific. I think the
Of course,
fact
you have
that
the
we've sold-
90-foot right-of-way.
Well, I know that, but we don't, I'm not even suggesting that we retain the 90-foot right-of-way. I mean, I don't think we're trying to drive it back that far, because as Dan points out, a PUD might be able to cut that 90 feet some, and I wouldn't want to inhibit that. But I think another specific is, we've talked before about, as you exit the highway there, becoming an entry welcome at some point. It could be the Georgetown Township welcome near the exit, and this could be the identification of, you know, the Jenison Business District or something along those lines, after you've gone a stretch there past your recognizable entry into the township. That's a specific potential idea. I realize we're not here to say what it would be, but I think the ideas are clear enough, or the potential is clear enough, that I vote in favor of reserving some of that point.
See, I think, Mr. Chairman, just to respond, if I might, based on what you just said, Jim, then I could see it being further to the east rather than at the point. At the west end of the property, I could see if it's to be considered as an entry point, and you're talking about all the traffic, then the traffic coming off the ramp, something would be much more visible at the east end of that property. So then that's another issue that we would then have to consider. Just my thought, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
3 in support right now.
If, and I'm sure Ron is right, if a buyer comes up, say, I'll pay you 1.9 million, that's the asking price, it's gone. And I agree. But if he says, I'll come up and I'll pay you 1.8, then we can go back and say, okay, but we want a reserve. Now we can negotiate. I don't see, I think, I'm correct in hearing you, if it's 1.9, there's no negotiations. That's it. But if it's a different offer, yes, then it's open to negotiations.
What you don't want to do is surprise the buyer with a negotiation after the fact that because you haven't paid my full price, we want to retain a piece of the corner. It's best to disclose that now in the listing agreement with its correct legal description. It's a simple matter of just getting a survey done. And if a buyer comes along and it's the right buyer and they want the point, we have the option of selling it because we control it. If the buyer wants to buy not the point and there's still interest in the piece, we can go ahead and sell that. And remember this clock idea, whatever, at least from my point of view, it was a new email, basically kind of a different thought, and maybe it just takes a little time to have some more discussion on it. We can still go ahead and sell Kmart, move forward with that, and maybe take a week or two and figure out the answer for what do we want to do with that point.
I agree with Ron, and I've talked with Dan previously about that corner. I think it's one of the most dangerous we have. You're literally turning left when the traffic light says red. We've talked to the Ottawa County Road Commission. They did a study down there. They feel comfortable with it. Personally, I do not. I would like to have the option on that corner that we have that in our pocket. I think full disclosure, I think that's you're putting your cards on the table ahead of time. And then the option for a sign or a clock or something. And I would not be talking a huge amount of land. But certainly the corner is the most visible spot in Georgetown Township. And what's going to go there will be seen by thousands of people on a regular basis. For us to just give up control of that, I think we'd be regretting it later on. This would delay it slightly, at least on that one piece of property, until we had a survey. But to get the other property up, I don't see that as being a huge problem.
If you guys want to move to not include 200 Baldwin tonight, but move forward with Chicago Drive, I could be on board with that. I just want to point out, and I would expect Colliers, if we shrink the size of the parcel we're selling, is probably going to revisit the listing price of what we're selling as well. And maybe that depends on the survey and what's usable and what's not usable, and we'll have a decision to make then. But if I were a buyer and it was less land, I would expect he's probably going to have a different recommendation.
It'd still be just that, though, recommendation, right? You couldn't find
Correct. Yeah, we could list it for $5 million if we want to.
I think it could even be a positive if we talked about putting something there that would be well accepted by the community. Otherwise, they have to actually come up with what they're going to put there. And I would, I would be pushing myself for a sign if I was in a restaurant. But something that's for almost the heart of Georgetown Township right there, as far as where the traffic flows. I'd like us to have an option and keep that property.
Is that a motion?
So I would support the motion that we list the Kmart property and that we wait on the 200 Baldwin property with Dan checking out the options that we'd have, possibly a survey. But there'd have to be a recommendation of how much land. Personally, I'm not looking, I would say very minimal. More for traffic. Would that also for potential if another lane were to swing onto the expressway? To open that area up? Yes. One of the merchants down there has complained that every time a large truck goes to the right, they bounce that curb every time. And there's been talk about, well, then just eliminating traffic from flowing that way, but I'd like to see an option made.
Wait a minute, you're talking eastbound, right? Bouncing the curb?
Yes.
Yeah. So that has no effect over on our property at all, if it's eastbound traffic.
No, I'm talking about coming down
Main Street?
Main Street and then making a right there, right on that point.
Trucks make right there?
Yes, they do. One of the merchants complained to me
Never
about
seen
that.
it.
That
Never seen it.
no.
Tell them to get a picture.
Dr. Rockwell's not happy about that.
Have Dr. Robert get a picture of it. A big truck making a right-hand turn lane on
Yes.
there. I'm sure it happens, but, well, I'll throw a little more mix into this. The agreement, that's for the total property. That cannot be piecemealed out, right? In other words, I'd like to buy a section of 200 Baldwin.
That's possible. They could make an offer.
Okay,
Any offer,
okay.
they could make an offer to buy any part of the property.
Any part of the, okay,
Look at, you can look at
all right,
if you want to.
yeah. Okay, good. I wasn't clear on that.
Are we discussing just 200 right now? Or 200 Baldwin?
We're discussing direct the township superintendent to complete a listing agreement with Colliers of 1.9 for Baldwin, 0.5 for 294, and 2.788 for 174.
All right, if all that's on the floor, then on the Kmart piece, we've talked about carving out the land, so that's covered for the walkway or bikeway. What ability do we have inside of a listing agreement to reserve, and we've kind of touched upon this, but to refuse a purchaser? You remember I asked the ones who came in front of us that question. I understand if they come with a counteroffer, you've got every ability to decline and what have you, but let's say someone came with a full price offer and said, we'll pay your asking price. And it was, a large automotive parts distributorship, and we said, and you may tell me it doesn't meet the zoning code, I don't know, but I'm just throwing an example out there, and we say, oh man, we had in mind something better, something different than that. Would we have the ability to say, you know what, appreciate, it's a strong offer, obviously, but we're going to decline it?
We can include that in the agreement, and that's valid up until the time of close. So if they come to us with something you like, and they turn around and buy it, they turn around and sell it to the person you would sell to, that's how long that would be valid. It would be valid to that buyer.
Right, right,
So yes, you could put that restriction of who to sell,
right,
that would be a selling point.
right. I just have concern there that, we've talked about,
I've expressed that concern
Yeah.
to Chris, and he's kind of indicated we can do some things to work on.
hi, Chris. I didn't see you. Yeah,
Actually, that's an issue of issues that you could be concerned to the board. We want to
that's where we're a little different. The township seller is different than a private seller, in that the private seller typically, not always, but typically just wants dollars. And a township wants something not always entirely defined by money, sometimes by aesthetics, sometimes by harmony with what's around.
We can put that in a listing agreement, that you have the right to choose kind of what use goes.
Chris, why don't you come up to the microphone, because you've heard a lot of dialogue here, and you maybe can reassure some people, and,
Yeah, so I think when it comes to kind of what use goes there, we can put that in the listing agreement. Typically, we do, especially with landlords, it's, even when we're leasing property, it's okay, they have to review the financials and approve the use. Obviously, you don't want something nasty going there and ruining the whole center. So we can put that in the listing agreement along with that, that says, you guys approve the use, and then obviously the financials and everything along those lines, so.
then along that line, would that open at all the negotiations for a little bit of that corner?
For Baldwin,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Yep. So,
So then if we have that restriction, then it's kind of a moot point whether we say, okay, we're going to keep X feet of that.
ideally, how big?
We have a chance at that later.
How big of a clock would you want there, ideally?
I don't think we.
I don't know if there's a clock.
That
but
was
there-
just
there-
a
Even a
thought,
sign,
but
yeah.
if something was to be
Or a
put there,
monument or something.
we'd have to be
Yeah, it
also
was been, a
concerned
monument's been discussed in the past, Chris.
that it would be safe enough that if people were to jump the curb, they wouldn't hit it.
Hit it, yes.
What's your thoughts? Do we have to
I
state?
mean, typically, I don't think it'll diminish from the price too much if we cut off a little section and keep that for specifically Georgetown Township. But like I said, if an offer comes for 1.9 and it's the whole thing, then you're going to have to be forced to kind of sell that piece, which makes it a little more difficult.
You put a clause on the 1.9 that the township reserves the right to
To have, right, yeah,
right to put something in that little point.
yeah. I think we may have to define that point, say X amount of feet,
Yeah.
but we could do that.
And would I be correct by doing that? We would not have to get a new survey or legal description by just,
Yeah,
Put
we
that
can put
clause
that in
there.
there. And we'll make sure to tell each buyer that comes to us that description too as well.
Okay.
Of course, when someone comes up with the big money, you say, the heck with the corner.
Chris, what about Kentucky Fried Chicken? You'd expressed some concerns that we should, because we have another year and a half or 2 years on that we shouldn't be negotiating with them right now? What
think
are your thoughts?
At the end of the day, it is your decision, but as a big developer, kind of if they have the opportunity to purchase everything as a whole, the KFC, the Payless Shoes, and the former Kmart land, that's going to be extremely appealing to an investor from a standpoint.
We may touch on you later, because that's the next item on the agenda, Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? You guys have questions of Chris?
I just want to make clear with both these contracts that I'd want to see similar type reservation language. That is, I'd feel the same way about 200 Baldwin's I do about 200 Chicago Drive, where, if someone comes in and says, I want to buy it, and I want to put the Baldwin bar there, and let's say they meet our criteria for food, sales, and all the rest, and we might go as a board, we were thinking more fine dining, or whatever. I'd want to be able to reserve the right for such a prominent spot. This isn't, some other place right in the middle of, we may not care where. This is right at your gateway. I'd at least want to have similar to Kmart, without diminishing our ability to market the place, to be able to go, you know what? Is that what we could get excited about and go, you know, that's not one that's likely to be empty in 2 years, and now we have an empty storefront as our entryway. I'd like to know that we have, similar in both contracts, the ability to approve the buyer, not just the price.
Do we, under zoning, have that right? If they fit, if a property owner fits within the zoning ordinance, do we have the right? I question is saying, no, I don't like you, you can't go there.
Not under zoning, but purchase you have.
Oh, the purchase, you know. And you're talking as an addendum to the purchase.
No, I'm saying as a term of the purchase, as a term of who to accept, as in terms of an offer, yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. I'd like to see that with both contracts, and it isn't presently in either that I could read, Chris, I mean, at least as I read it. And we talked about the carve-outs, and I think I heard you to say, Chris, because I think Dr. Moore was saying, so it's kind of unnecessary that that be spelled out, but I think your reply to him was, no, much like what Ron said, it's best to describe up front what it is that you intend to carve out and reserve, be it the bike path or be it, 45 feet from the middle of the right-of-way. It's best to have that described and understood.
Well, because of these many questions, this motion is on the floor. Do you want to wait and redo that, set aside
No,
a specific number?
I mean, I think Dan, much like you said, I mean, Dan could incorporate the carve-outs or the limitations on buyers or whatever the reservation.
Are you prepared to the carve-out?
The only thing I'm not sure is everybody want to carve out on the 200 volt?
And if so, how much?
Yeah, I'm thinking 30 feet is kind of meaning what you're talking about, but we can go 40.
30 from the middle of the road?
30 from the right-of-way line.
Oh, from the right-of-way line. So 63 feet then from the middle of the road.
Initially, of course, we were talking about a Veterans Memorial there, and then that, because of change of plans, and now we're looking at another area, but that, I still think that's a possibility. Now, if we arrive at a decision of another area for a Veterans Memorial, then I don't particularly interested in a carve-out. I can't imagine what it would be for.
So I like John's and Chad's suggestion that we put off the 200 Baldwin for tonight's meeting, and that we sign up the 200 Chicago Drive. Get going on the one and try to get going soon on the other after we've addressed this carve-out idea.
Favor of that.
Well, I hear suggestions, and I heard Mr.
Well, John, you
Schwam
made a
say
motion.
I'll support. I haven't heard a motion
Yeah, John made
to
a
amend
motion
this.
earlier. He put it in a supportive sense, but he made a motion, and I'll support that motion.
He did. He says, I would support if so, so and so.
Oh, okay. Try again.
Okay. For 200 Baldwin, I would recommend that we delay a decision tonight, that we look back at setbacks and come up with logical, Dan had mentioned maybe 30 feet, but whatever is practical for that area, and that would be spelled out in the listing agreement, so that for future use by the township, we'd have the option on that property.
Support.
Could we just say delay action on 200 Baldwin?
I vote that we delay action on 200 Baldwin.
Support.
Mr. Chairman, I would be against that,
That's
the way that that's worded. I think we should, if we're going to do that, I think we should be specific and say within a certain time frame, we're going to have this decided, and we're going to come back and say by the first meeting in February or the last meeting in January or whatever, that we'll know what we're going to carve out there, because I envision that we'll be sitting here 6 months from now still wondering what we're going to do with 200 Baldwin. So I will vote no on that amendment, and unless it's clarified as to when this is going to happen.
I suppose
Now, you get one crack at amending the amendment.
Maybe my recommendation is just to reset the discussion. Maybe we just vote down whatever amendment or whatever motions we've just been discussing, and then do a fresh
over?
motion as related to 200 Chicago Drive.
We certainly can do that.
Means Chicago Drive or Baldwin?
I mean, a fresh motion related to 200 Chicago Drive, and we just won't take action tonight on 200 Baldwin.
Okay, what I'm gonna, is there any problem with that, first of all, with people? Okay, what we're going to do then is vote first on your amendment, because that's on the floor. And if you want to head towards what Mr. Tuttle is saying, you will vote no on that amendment. Then we will vote on, excuse me, the motion, and to get rid of that, we'll have also will be a no vote if you want to get rid of that. Then this is cleared and off the floor, and you can come with any substitute.
Dr. Moore, I'm not sure I had support on that.
Yeah, I heard, I think Mr.
I supported it, and
supported
I
it.
have no problem with Rich saying, let's deal with it the second meeting in January. I mean, makes sense. He just wants the timeline.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So we
certainly
got two
do.
possibilities. You can put in a time, or we can put the whole thing down and start over.
Well, I hate to muddy the waters anymore, to amend the amendment, which is actually what we would be doing, but actually, I don't know if you can amend that, because it was to delay, and that's what they voted, that's what they support, or the motion was, and that's what the support was, to delay. But now, can I amend that and say to?
Delay
Until?
Yes.
I fear one of us
We
is
will
going
not
to
go
ask
to
Mrs.
an
Minnie to
amendment
read
to an
this back
amendment to
to us in a couple minutes.
You may amend an amendment.
Well, then I would amend that amendment to delay until, and I don't have my calendar in front of me, so I don't know what those dates are. What is that?
January 26th?
January 26, to delay until January 26, and the understanding then being that we will know what the carve-out piece is going to be, the dimensions and all of that. Is that what I mean, I'm not in favor of that to begin with, but is that what the understanding here is?
Well, I think, best I can hear is, we're fairly confident of what should be done with Chicago Drive.
Yes,
The end decision is on Baldwin. Now, we've got into this mess of delay, and if you want to amend the amendment to delay until such a date,
Part of the problem is that January 5, we have our brainstorming session, and it was on the table that this would be a possibility where we put the Veterans Memorial. We're already deciding that's not going to happen, or it'd be much more difficult. I'm kind of surprised we're voting on it without reserve that land, because we made it pretty clear that that was an option. So I think delaying it now is a logical thing to do. Certainly until after we've had our brainstorming session, goal setting.
anything else? All we have on so far is the amendment, right? There was no support on,
Can I support that as well?
yeah, you
I'll
can.
support that as well.
Okay, now we're just talking a date of delay. January was what?
26, I believe. he said.
26. That's for 200 Baldwin.
Correct.
Okay, anything to address the date of the delay? If not, all in favor of the date of delay, January 26th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, is carried. Now we're back to the amendment, which is to delay existing agreement. You got the amendment? You can read back to me? Delay 200 Baldwin. Yes, from listing. Okay. Any questions on, no. The listing of 200 Baldwin. To delay it till, right now it's till January 26th. Seeing none, all in favor of that amendment, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Is carried. And now we're back to the original motion to direct you with those parameters to go ahead with the other.
Can we get this motion, can we be told what this final motion is that we're voting on?
The way I understand it, what you did here, you're basically just voting on Chicago Drive at this point.
That's it's to direct the township superintendent to negotiate a listing agreement for Chicago Drive with Colliers.
To sign the listing agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, to complete, because we had that, we amended that
Right.
motion to begin with.
Yeah.
So the final motion we're voting on is simply 200 Chicago Drive. The discussed parcels, which are exclusive of Kmart, at the prices I'm sorry,
KFC.
KFC.
Correct.
Thank you. At the prices we discussed earlier.
Correct.
Okay.
Chairmanship material.
No, thank you.
Anything else on that motion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and it's carried.
Is there something, I just want to ask, is there something you need from me to carve out, or you're going to be working on that?
Confusing us now, because we
Yeah.
talked two carve-outs, Dan.
We talked about the carve out for our January 26th meeting. I just wondered, is there something you're looking for me, or you just need to?
Well, I think you're going to need some direction.
That's why I'm asking.
Yes,
Something you want.
yes, because there's some people feel, want it as a rider.
Probably can discuss that at the goal setting, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we could. Why don't we put that to bed then? Good idea. Sale of KFC property. The motion is to direct the township superintendent to negotiate the sale of the KFC property to the current building owner and to bring the agreement back to the board for review and/or approval.
So moved.
Support?
It's been recommended by the Finance Committee. Any questions, comments?
Guess maybe just the only comment I would have is I know the existing owner has expressed interest. I was, as a part of finance, I had supported this motion coming to the full board, and frankly, I support Dan going to the owner to negotiate to see what price the owner would be willing to pay and to bring that back. And with this motion, we're not making a decision to sell the property, we're directing you to come back to us with a negotiated price for the property, and we will decide at that point if that's a fair offer from our perspective.
I think you make a good point, and because the motion is to bring the agreement back to the board for review and approval, I would be happy to say review and possible approval,
Is that a
but
motion?
unless you want approval. Because this says that whatever he brings back, we must approve. The way I read that motion.
Guess I wasn't reading it that same way.
Well, that's okay then, if you feel comfortable.
If you want to amend it to be more comfortable with the language, I'm happy to go along with that.
Well, I hate
Well,
to
it
go
says to
another
bring it
minute.
back to bring the agreement back to the board for review
And approval.
and approval.
We could strike approval. What's the typo?
I will say I was affected by Chris's comments before concerning, should we sell it completely as a parcel, will we get more money for it at that time? And since we have a year and a half, 2 years, again, I think we should leave ourselves some options.
I'm sorry, I missed the correction on the typo.
Potential.
Oh, okay. You don't like possible. I'll move that the motion be amended that between and approval, potential be inserted.
Support.
Any question on that amendment? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay, is carried. Okay, now back to the original motion with that amendment. Any questions on the original motion?
I thought when I had raised the concern that Chris raised today, in the past, the response I got from the board was that this property owner had agreed that he was going to make significant investment and purchase the property. And so that between the two, it was very attractive. And I understood that, and I kind of came about, I think, on that point to say, all right, as long as it didn't appear there'd be any obvious detriment to the overall sale of the property behind it. I haven't heard anything as it relates to this negotiation now that Dan may have with him as to whether we're also still expecting that he plans to make that investment, because I thought that was a real hook for some of you, that he was going to put several $100,000 into it.
I'm sure that's going to be brought up in the negotiations, correct?
Yeah, okay.
Anything else?
And the response I got then was, anybody who'd buy it would be likely to dot the roadway with a couple of uses anyway. You remember that? So maybe we're curious perhaps why Chris made that statement, because John, you were very supportive of KFC and potential sale to them.
I'll be honest, Jim, yes, I was.
Yeah.
To have someone that's been there for that period of time,
Yeah.
but to have someone that's an expert in the area say that they have a concern and has talked with us about the potential of maybe putting a hospital in there or something like that, that's an alarm for us. And I think we have to take that seriously. So I'm asking you, this is a tough one for me, because I believe in loyalty. They've been there for decades, and I'm concerned about pulling the rug out from under them. But we also have to do what's best for the community, and depending on what we might be able to get back there, to have that option, and we have some flexibility as far as time. I think it actually gives us a better bargaining chip for KFC to know that this is something we're wrestling with, and it's not a slam dunk for them. I would hate to lose them.
That's what you call negotiations.
One thought I'd had is that the likely buyer wouldn't need that outlot, and we would be, by selling it as a whole, not maximizing what we get if we parsed it off, In other words, they would capture a little more than would we, from a financial perspective. And would it be inappropriate to ask Chris to step back to the mic to say, what did he
No.
mean by that comment?
He's the specialist that we rely on.
I guess,
Certainly would be appropriate. He's here for information.
So I think from a standpoint of, they've been there for 20-plus years. Obviously, they want to own the building in some sense, but you still have, I think, the upper hand in some sense with having a year-and-a-half lease, law-binding agreement that says, you got to be here, you got to pay X amount each year. So in some sense, I don't know if rushing, saying, okay, well, we need to sell now. I think in some sense you can sit back, think about it, say, okay, well, who's deciding to come to the market right now, and who could potentially use that outlot or use that building? Gives you kind of an upper hand in some sense.
Chris, doesn't that upper hand allow us to leverage a higher price today from the current owner than it does 2 years from now?
I mean, it's all dependent on what happens around the area.
Because if they buy it today, then they won't have to make those lease payments for another 2 years as well. So today's value from the existing owner would be higher than it would likely be 2 years from now.
Yes.
Okay.
But like I said, stuff's changing around the community like I talked about last
Sure.
time with Alpine, 28th Street Southeast, Rivertown's obviously developing quite a bit and filling up, so,
Yeah, but we also run the risk that if we get near the expiration of the lease,
yes.
now the existing property compared to an alternative property for the owner, we lose the upper hand in that as well. So the existing owner, if we wanted to retain the existing owner on that parcel, we're better off negotiating a sale sooner rather than later with the existing owner. But if we wanted to go to the open market and see what larger developer and use this as a piece of that is kind of what you're saying.
I'm not saying a larger developer wouldn't buy the whole piece and then later down the road potentially even sell it to the KFC, because he's been there for 20-plus years. He clearly wants to be there. He's doing well, or he wouldn't have been there he wouldn't have renewed his options. So,
Chris, can you give us an example of a user that would need a wider entryway to that property than what presently exists and might wish that they had the option to buy the KFC for their use of the whole property versus just parceling it out and themselves selling it to KFC?
are you saying like a big developer comes in?
Yeah, I mean, I
buys
got the impression from your statement earlier that if we sold it, that it would inhibit or limit the uses of the larger piece behind, what sort of user would need, you think, that additional area up front? If
I
you-
mean, a developer could come in, buy the center, right? Say they don't want KFC there. Say they want someone else there, another user that comes into the market. Like I was talking about, Chick-fil-A wasn't looking around here 2 years ago. Say someone comes in around that and says, you know, I want to be on that drive. That way they're not stuck with just, okay, we're just going to have KFC.
Yeah, you know that's a buzzword for me, don't you? You know,
They'll be here. They'll be here.
they'll be here.
Is there
I
a
know.
KFC on 44th Street?
There's one on 56.
River, by Rivertown?
No,
No.
no. But at least what you're saying, to answer my question, is you would, it sounds like you would envision that piece of land where the KFC sits would be unlikely to be raised and somehow used with what's behind. It's going to be probably its own parcel up front. It just might be a different use.
No,
than-
building.
I can't see a big developer putting a big store in the back and then potentially putting something in the front.
Yeah.
No, I can't see
Yeah.
that.
Why you say Chick-fil-A? Sheesh.
We'll get you to the grand opening or something.
Anything else for Chris on this particular piece of property? Thanks, Chris. Anything further? The board would like to. There was a motion made on that. Okay, the motion is to negotiate the sale KFC property and bring the agreement back to the board for review and potential approval. Nothing further on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It is carried. Before the next item, which is the budget amendments, there's been a slight change, if you have them before you, in the budget amendments 10100065000 cable TV. Received a check today. It was listed as 12,000, and it should be listed as 32 now. And the same is true of the next item, Community Projects, WCET, 32,000 estimate to cover projected revenue. So those things will be in that motion to approve the 2014 budget amendments.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It is carried. Update on the microphone system. This is a recommendation by the Finance Committee, and you also see there on your agenda that they asked for an alternative. What we haven't had?
We haven't got a formal response yet back from them, so if you want to delay, but they did tell us that at first thought it would be more expensive.
Sure, I'll move that we delay it until we get the formal proposal.
Well, why don't you move the proposal, but we don't have anything to delay.
Okay. So you want to vote on that
Or
motion
else, yeah.
and vote it down?
Well,
Is that
we'll
what you're?
accept either that or accept a change of the motion to approve the proposal for AVI to purchase the new microphones subsequent to getting the gooseneck proposal.
Then I would amend,
And we can even probably say whatever price is the better, right?
but we have to get that motion on the floor first
Yeah.
before we can amend it.
I'm waiting for you to craft a beautiful motion.
Well, I'll move the motion so that we can get the amendment to it.
Support.
Okay,
Then I'd like to amend so that it could read, if this is permissible to you, to approve the proposal from AVI to purchase the new microphone subsequent to receiving, and you said a proposal from them for
Yes.
the gooseneck and however you want to word that.
yes. Gooseneck and along with accessory wiring, if necessary.
So I would move that amendment.
I'll support that. Any questions on the amendment? That's just to get a comparison of probably lapel mics, how they would, we used to have gooseneck mics up here, Went to lapel because the tendency was the goosenecks were here, and we were here speaking, and it did not go out. And that was, but maybe if the goosenecks are here, we'll do well. But at least look at the cost of them. So any questions on the amendment?
Just a question, I think the way we ended up with it worded is actually us granting approval tonight. And I'm more comfortable tabling this item until like the January 12th meeting, at which time we'll have the additional information for review. I think otherwise if we approve the motion as it was just stated, we're actually approving Dan going ahead is once the other quote comes in, and I don't think that's what our intent was. I think our intent was to review that subsequent quote.
So in
So
order
I
to
guess
change your comfort into action, it would be to postpone until we get the rest of the information.
Yes, I would move to postpone the motion until the additional information, the second quote is obtained.
Could I just, that, you
let's
had,
wait, see if there-
no one's
I'll support.
seconded that yet?
I did.
Okay.
Well, anyways, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, maybe another way could be to, as the original amendment, to subsequent to receiving and reviewing. Would that capture what because you're saying would be approved, it would just, we would review. I'm okay with tabling too, but.
I think I'm just more comfortable with tabling.
My original thing was the proposal, as Mr. Vanderklark phrased it, the motion was, I think, unless you need more time to determine whether, the lapel or tight mic is better than the gooseneck, or the gooseneck is better than the lapel, I was thinking the holdup was, what are the cost differences? And that's why we would know the cost differences. We wouldn't even have to act on it if we took the least cost. Unless you have a philosophical disagreement with whatever type of mic would come in at the lowest cost.
Philosophically, I haven't really considered it that strongly, but
Isn't it interesting
Well,
that
then
the
it's
mics are working so wonderfully tonight?
Isn't it a cost? It's a cost issue then, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Now,
I'm in favor of the
Mr. Vanderklark
tabling,
doesn't
too.
even need a mic.
No, I
And you
don't.
don't either.
I don't.
Okay, but anyway, the motion on the floor is to postpone until this information came in. That's the,
Table. Is that the same?
no, postpone.
Postpone?
Postpone.
Okay.
Any questions on the postponement? Okay, all in favor of the postponement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? It is postponed until we get that information in. You also received the demolition bids for 111 Baldwin. I'll entertain a motion to approve the low bid of $6,900 for JMB demolition.
So moved.
Support.
Any questions on that? Comments? We don't know when they would begin. No. Of course, that's something they can do anytime. No questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It is carried. We are now to our second public comment. I'm sure our little tete-a-tete here must have stimulated something. You can see not always, the board doesn't always agree, not only the people.
Kelly Britton, 7656 Louise Avenue. I just have a comment on the master plan. I believe it's for Rosewood Park, yeah. I just would like to state that it would be nice if you guys would reconsider a splash pad there and maybe putting it at 8th Avenue Park and keep it more of a water park type of, because you have the swimming and you have a playground and then you'd have a splash pad. And someone even suggested paddle boards or kayaks. So it's just a thought. So that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close that portion. Discussion and general information, the Rosewood Park Master Plan, which Mrs. Britton just referred to. Dan, why don't you give us comments on that?
I have a lot of lines, and let me turn some lights off for a moment. This here, obviously, you can see is the current borders of the roads, and the soccer ball is here. This is, and the parking lot is, this current parking lot is something like this size right here, 2.5 lanes. And MC Smith kind of made some proposals here of starting here, obviously the soccer field is the same, but moving and creating a driveway here, putting a picnic area here, and then moving the mini golf, I should say the frisbee golf, to this section of the park, kind of utilize this area. This currently is just wooded area. And you can see also a new playground. This is the splash pad which was talked about. We also propose a picnic area here, and there's a gas fire and an open fire pit proposed, as well as this area is a sand area for potential for ice for skating in the winter. It's sand, he's proposing to use it as volleyball courts, but really the purpose is that it's for sand for ice skating. And then an expansion of the parking lot here, of course, and this side of the parking lot as well, so increasing parking. You can see quite a few trails proposed, including an inner trail, and of course we already have this outer kind of loop all the way around. But fixing some of the corners, there is a couple spots here where it's just not a natural walk around, so we could kind of change some of the corners that are proposed. This proposal that he's drawn is approximately 1.3 million. In our parks plan, we just talked about moving about 850,000 for this park. You could take this plan, or you could divide it even, or change it, or alter it with different uses. For example, this area could be delayed and just left for future space, or you could remove the splash pad and make changes, whatever you kind of want to see is kind of the direction we need. This parking lot and this parking lot could be done later. The parking lot's in rough shape, and it needs a few more spaces, so it'd be nice to at least address the current parking to make that a little more functional and the repairs that are necessary there. But some of the direction is, do you want inner trails? And how many of the trails? I mean, trails are very popular, they're frequently used, and there's quite a few proposed here. And whether you want that, when we have a trail all the way around. So the key for us is for direction. You don't need to decide anything tonight. The key is that we need to know if you like this plan, if you want to see changes as far as the master plan as a whole, and then to get some idea of what you actually want to see accomplished in 2015, which would be this first phase. And the rest could remain as a subsequent phase if you do like it, or with no date to be determined, kind of as the master plan will come around again, you can look at it. So, I mean, if you wanted to do a certain area, how much you want to put in the playground, all those things are up in the air and what you can see. So we need some direction in January, or what you want to see it, if you want to see it actually completed in 2015. The bathrooms, for example, are proposed right here, and with the bathrooms there, it takes quite a while to get the construction for that completed. We want to have them operational for a winter, a year from now, with all the utilities and everything underground. We need to decide in January so it can be designed and constructed this time. Any questions with MC Smith proposed? And then if you have comments or just general feedback of things you like, it would just be nice to know and hear that.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to the superintendent's request for what would you like to see in 2015? The proposed park plan, I looked at that again today, and in July 21, and then again on September 29, I believe this was with the Services Committee, or it may have been just with MC Smith and our superintendent, but they went over the things that people wanted for Rosewood Park, or what what had been suggested. And of course, one of the things back in September was a master plan. We have that now. But one of the suggested park improvements included a year-round restroom facility. And then there was also discussion about a winter warming shelter. However, that was thrown in. But picnic shelter, expanded play area with small splash pad, and so forth. Then in that plan, if you looked at it, and I'm sure all of you have, on the capital improvement schedule, and this is just a schedule, and these things can fluctuate. But what I'm answering the question about what would I like to see in 2015. I would like to see parking improvements. I would like to see the restroom building with small concession. I would like to see a barrier-free playground, and that would include then some landscaping. I also think another picnic shelter, or benches, but a small picnic shelter. He shows on the master plan this large one, I think, which is a 40-foot, which I think is too big. But on the east end of his master plan, he shows a 30-foot. So if you're asking what would I like to see, and that would keep it within that projected cost, and I would like to see us stay within that, and that would be around $850,000. But those are the things I would like to see accomplished. We know people want the restroom facility. The parking lot's in terrible shape. It needs to be redone. And so, in that restroom facility could offer a small concession area, but I'm not hung up on that so much. And then I'm also very much in favor of the barrier-free playground. So those are my things for 2015.
Gee, that's great. Because, well, of course, you've had exposure to it here.
Right.
Anyone else?
I think I'll just say I'm glad to see that it's out there. I think MC Smith did a really good job. I think that the modifications they've proposed really make it a year-round park and offer something for every season. I think I've heard consistently from the public that they love this park and would love to see improvements. And I think they did a really nice job. I like that. I look forward to whatever decision, and I hope that we do get to a point of deciding and taking action very quickly that we can get to improvements in 2015. And I think an investment in a park is a true investment in the community. I think that that's one of the best places that we can, allocate the resources of the community. So I agree. I'll look at it more. I could see some tweaks as far as picnic shelter size, the number of fireplaces or benches or locations per hap. I think there are ways to probably bring the cost down from what they've proposed. But overall, I like the mix of services that they've included here.
Any other comments? Because obviously this is going to be a lot more input other than the preliminary we're having today.
One
I'm a little bit concerned, but maybe as far as room for slip and slide, when they have their vendors out there, which I have no idea how large of an area, but if that gets all developed, my question would be, which I think is important, where do they set up?
Parking lots, probably.
Is that the answer?
I'm guessing.
Well,
It's not a final.
Oh, right now
Well,
they
right
have
now, because, well,
How they set up?
I'll dovetail into that. Right now,
Yeah, they do.
I'll take, I even know, these are 3 volleyball courts, and this also can be phased in. I'm with Mr. Vanderklok, because this little play area here has been very popular, and I would like to see an expansion of that. I question the splash pad, the size, I agree with him, of the shelter. This, I think, all of this can be delayed, then, at least for now, it still could be, vendors could be in there. I don't see myself a necessity for this side over here for the parking and the shelter there. But again, this, as I say, is a plan for us to mull over and think, and I would expect that we all would study it and probably rate, the restrooms, that would be a number one for me. We'll rate them. One is, yeah, I think we should have it. Two, well, you're on the border, could or couldn't. And number three, no, you don't think you would want that. But this was his suggestion was three courts of volleyball, sand volleyball, which I don't see a need for, and then also a possible membrane placed on top of that could be flooded and used for skating.
Well, and at the Services Committee, I don't really think that we discussed volleyball courts at all. I think that was brought up because someone had mentioned having a ice skating rink there. So then Mike Smith put that into the plan, but that wasn't really part of our discussion. Also, another thing that we discussed was if the playground was handicap accessible, it would take longer, but we could possibly get a grant for that. That would delay it some. But I believe that we should go ahead with the bathrooms for sure. And yeah, the east side, I'm not really gung-ho on that.
West side.
Or the west side, yeah.
Just a comment, Carol, I think about the accessible play area, and you mentioned there might be grant money available. That would mean 2.5 years before we'd
play
see
area.
that money, because we'd have to apply, and time has passed us already, I think, for this year, and it takes at least a good full year or more. And so we would, if we'd go that route, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but if we want to delay that for 2.5 years, because it would probably be 2.5 years before we'd see any money.
Then would that include the bathrooms? I'm not
No.
sure. No, it wouldn't, right. So, yeah, I'm just
Well,
saying
I
that
say
that's
no,
what-
I don't
yeah.
really know.
Apply for whatever you want in the grant. The grant deadline is March 1st.
Okay,
Might be March, actually, it's March, maybe 31st is the day of March, so
okay.
it could, like, Randy Clark said there, it could take at least a year before you even found out, and then a year before formally.
Right. And I'm just suggesting. I mean,
Right,
that
I
was
know,
just
I know,
suggested,
I know.
you know. It's not saying we have to do that.
Right, right.
And I kind of agree with Kelly, maybe if we did have another splash pad, maybe 8th would be better than here. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
I think you've already got water at 8th, Here people are hot.
Yeah, that's true.
You can jump in the lake at 8th.
Yeah, that's true, too.
I think MC Smith does a good job.
They do a
Yeah,
great job.
And they tried to put, everything in here, and it's our position, well, yeah, we want this or we don't want this, and that's, just to introduce you to it tonight, I want you all have the plan, you just picked it up tonight, in fact, it's been online, but to digest, and then, and yeah, we have a time element, but also this park is gonna be there hopefully long after we're all gone. So it's a long-range, betterment of the park. So, yeah, if there's anything outstanding, say them now, but otherwise, consider it, and as I say, you rate the things kind of what you really want to see in that park. As I say, the present play area, when I go through there, I go by there, unless it's inclement weather, I almost always see at least 3 or 4 cars. I think it's a great babysitting for mothers. It's fenced, it's enclosed, they're sitting on the bench reading or something, and the kids are having fun playing in the area. So that kind of excited me.
Dr. Moore, at our goal-setting session with Al Vandenberg, could this be one of the elements that we rate the park?
If you have some pretty definite ideas, certainly we could allow some time for future discussion, seeing it's all, hitting you now, kind of. Yeah. And that gives you something to do over Christmas time and New Year's. Seeing you're off for 2 weeks.
Just a general comment about the park plan, which I find rather interesting, they have a description in there about different types of parks. Rosewood Park currently is considered a neighborhood park. But as you add amenities, there's a possibility it can become a community park. And there's a difference between neighborhood and community.
Definition that made sense to me of, is this the park that just the people who live within a mile go to, or is this the park that the community sees as a destination that they travel to? And I think in a lot of ways, Rosewood has already become that community park several times a year.
Two reasons. Two reasons mainly, right?
Centrally located.
No, slip and slide makes it a community park. Sledding makes it a community park. Okay, any other comments on that? Otherwise digest that, and that'll be for further discussion. And come up with formulating of what's acceptable to us. You have the plan and you have the costs. Also, I think, did you get in your plan this was the proposed restroom building design? Okay, you got that. There was some question of, we won't go into that now, but of size and arrangement and so on, and that's also fair game in the future. Anything else for discussion or general information?
I'd just like to thank John Swan for his editorial in the advance. That was well thought out, it was well written. The whole idea of the Chicago Drive streetscape, and it's my hope that the board will take the vision of what Granville has done and continue that through Georgetown Township, especially along Chicago Drive.
Good. I want to congratulate Mr. Tuttle. I think I hope it was not a horizontal move. He had a vertical move on a new job. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I don't know where I'm going to go now. I'm not going to run out to Fuller Avenue to stop in to see you.
Welcome anytime.
Yeah. Anything else to come? Do you have anything else, Mr. Superintendent? Okay, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. It's carried.